What if I told you that Americans working full-time jobs all across the country are currently lining up at food banks because the government is refusing to pay them the money that they're owed? But at the exact same time, our government is making sure we send out humanitarian aid to make sure people in other countries don't starve. Would you believe me? Picture this. An air traffic controller wakes up at 3 a.m., laces up and heads into a dark tower. Flights will take off today. Landings will happen today. Lives will hang on every instruction, every correction, every calm command in their headset. And that controller will do it all while staring at a bank app that says pending. Same for the TSA officer who has to catch the knife in a backpack before it gets on a plane. Same for the corrections officer, the Border Patrol agent, the Coast Guard crew, the FBI tech on a threat case. The label is essential, but the paycheck is not available. How would you feel if that was you? Working full-time because your job is essential to the safety of all of the Americans around you, but you aren't receiving a paycheck. How would you feel if that was you? And that's not a glitch in the system. That is the system. When there's a shutdown, the law forces these people to keep working to protect the public even as their pay has been completely shut off. There's a fancy name for the law behind this, but you don't need to memorize acronyms to understand the reality. The lights still have to stay on. Planes still have to not run into each other. Emergencies still have to be handled. Only now it's done on faith that Washington will get its act together soon and pay you the money you're owed before your bills pile up just a little too high. Now here's the part that makes my blood boil. Even during a shutdown, some foreign aid money can still move, especially the humanitarian carve-outs. This is the money for life and death programs that keep people from starving or dying of disease. Food shipments, safe water, emergency clinics, refugee shelters. Most of that is overseas. And it keeps flowing because we give those accounts special protection and often multi-year money. On top of that, a recent court order let the White House hold up billions in other foreign aid that Congress had already approved, meaning the spigot can be turned on or off pretty fast when the executive branch and the courts want it that way. But for essential workers in America, guess that's not as important as it should be, huh? So let's zoom out. On one side, you've got essential American workers, your neighbors, doing dangerous, high-stakes jobs with no foreseeable paycheck date. On the other screen, or on the other side, you've got a government that can freeze or fast-track billions beyond our borders with a signature and a stamp. You don't need to be anti-humanitarian to see the problem here. I'm not saying shut off famine relief. I'm saying if we can figure out a carve-out for emergencies overseas, we can figure out a carve-out to pay the people protecting Americans at home today. You've probably seen the same videos I have. Essential workers standing in line at food banks, apologizing to volunteers for taking a box they never thought that they would need. Try telling them, don't worry, you'll get back pay someday. Someday doesn't cover their bills due today. Someday doesn't keep a credit score from cratering. Someday doesn't refill the gas tank to get back to the tower for their next overnight shift. Over 50% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, and yet our government has decided that these essential workers that we depend on can continue working without any idea when the next paycheck is coming. How does that make sense? Here's the plain English version of what's happening. Congress didn't pass a simple funding bill. The government hit pause. If you're non-essential, you're sent home without pay until there's a deal. If you're essential, you still have to show up, but your paycheck may be delayed until there's a deal. At the same time, life-saving foreign aid programs keep going under emergency waivers or pre-approved funds because the system treats those as too important to stop. So we have quietly created a two-tier emergency system that says urgent for people overseas and optional for the essential workers at home. How is that American? The federal government has the responsibility to take care of its citizens. That means if you employ people and you force them to continue working because our safety literally depends on them, you should be obligated to pay them for their work. In case you didn't already know, these essential workers, the people that are required to continue coming into work employed by the federal government during a shutdown, are considered essential because our safety and our security depends on them. Now, thankfully, there was a one-time workaround to keep the military's next paycheck on track by digging through old accounts. Good. Troops shouldn't miss pay, obviously. And good on President Trump for prioritizing that. But why is the creativity always reserved for the politically loud fix, and not also for the TSA officer getting yelled at in a security line or the controller preventing two jets from colliding in low visibility? I'm glad that the troops are getting pay. I am. But obviously that was prioritized because it's a very loud political move. If we can find a way to pay our service members, we can also find a way to make sure every essential worker who keeps Americans safe continues to get paid when politicians fail to pass their little funding bills. I mean, if you were a man with a wife and multiple children depending on you to provide for them, you would probably want our government, your employer, to continue paying you for your labor, right? You'd think that a little disagreement about how much taxpayer money goes into paying for others' health insurance wouldn't prevent you from being paid, right? Well, at least you'd think. Now, if you're wondering what the actual fix here looks like, it's really not as complicated as you would think. Congress can pass a narrow, same-day bill to pay essential workers during a shutdown. Congress can continue arguing over all the things that don't actually help us. But don't hold Americans hostage. Put controllers, TSA, Border Patrol, prison guards, first responders under a domestic life-saving carve-out and pay them now. The rest of Washington can argue about every last comma in the budget later, but don't leave these men and women out to dry. And if it even crosses your mind that this is a bad idea because, well, that'll reduce pressure to make a deal, that's an admission that the pain that you are causing Americans is the point. Think about that. Making the people who protect you go unpaid is treated as a bargaining chip right now. That's not governing. That's leverage. And that is indefensible. That's disgusting. And anyone in Congress that has that mindset should be immediately removed from office and sent to be a lifeguard on a Carnival cruise ship as punishment or something. You cannot use Americans as leverage. And by refusing to pass a bill to pay these employees, you are saying that using Americans as leverage is part of the plan. That is part of the system. Well, guess what? That's wrong. We are the United States of America. We should absolutely help stop famine and disease abroad. Sure, cool. Because it's moral, and yes, because it helps keep crisis from spilling over our borders. But that moral clarity shouldn't vanish when we turn inward. The TSA officer who stops a weapon, the controller who prevents a mid-air collision, the agent who interrupts a trafficking ring, that's life-saving too. And we should take care of them. If we can carve out money to keep strangers alive across an entire freaking ocean, and I'm glad we do, but we can carve out money to keep our own essential workers whole, while they keep us safe here at home. The system already bends for emergencies. Let's bend it where the emergency is obvious and where the emergency is clear. The Americans we label essential but treat as expendable every single time Congress throws a tizzy, that's pretty clear, right? As Americans, we should demand that we take care of Americans, especially the Americans that keep us safe. That should be non-negotiable. You cannot use Americans as leverage. And that should be something that we all agree on.